Nathan, some cars stick around for a very long time. Think like the Corolla. That's been around for decades, right?
Sure.
But other cars, well, they show up and they're kind of a flash in the pan and then they're killed after just one product cycle. We like to call those one-hit blunders. And in this video, we're going to take you guys through our favorite, some of the most interesting one-hit blunders from each manufacturer here in the United States. Now, these could be cars that, well, maybe they were just plain bad. Maybe they hit the market at the wrong time. Maybe there was a financial crisis. Who knows? But we're going to take you through all these vehicles, explain why they didn't last so long, and let's just get on with it, shall we?
Absolutely.
Okay, so starting, we'll go alphabetically. First up is Acura, and the one-hit blunder we want to talk about from Acura is the ZDX.
ZDX was essentially a coupe-like SUV that Roman loved. I didn't think it was an ugly vehicle, but it was almost useless because the way it was shaped meant that rear seat passengers had to bend over in half in order to get into the vehicle. This kind of started the trend, or it was an early forebear of the trend going into other vehicles that have coupe-like designs, even though they're crossovers or SUVs. And it makes no sense to me, and apparently it made no sense to buyers.
I think now, actually, if it came out, this sort of lifted body style might work a little bit better, but when the ZDX came out, it did not work at all. Let's keep going. Next up, well, Audi would be the next manufacturer alphabetically, but Audi has so many vehicles that are in the same name or have been, kind of continuations of other vehicles. We actually couldn't think of one for Audi. So if you guys have a one-hit blunder from Audi's lineup that you think deserves to be on this list, drop us a comment down below, or any other manufacturer for that matter. Please, we want to hear what you guys come up with. Let's keep going. BMW is next, and the one-hit blunder from BMW is the Z8.
Still, in my mind, one of the best-looking BMWs of all time. It was, in many cases, the right car at the absolute wrong time.
Yeah.
It just could not be sold. Nobody really wanted them.
They were super expensive.
They were incredibly expensive. They were fairly quick. A lot of people didn't like the handling of the vehicle. They felt it was a little almost too sporty and not enough GT car to it.
But James Bond drove one.
Yeah, and it got cut into pieces in that particular James Bond movie. They are collectible now. They're fetching huge prices because not many were built, not many were sold.
Okay, let's keep moving on. Next up from Buick is the Cascada, and this is actually still on sale, although it's going to be cut from Buick's lineup in the very near future. What was the problem with the Cascada?
It's not a terrible car. I actually think that they're decent looking. They have a nice convertible roof. The whole point of the car is to give you a convertible Buick. And if you think about it, not many convertibles are available in the U.S. that aren't sports cars per se.
That's true.
But it's just not hitting the right market. Maybe too many people with osteo are trying to buy the car and not use the convertible top. I don't know.
Let's keep moving on. Next up is Cadillac. And for Cadillac, we selected the ELR. And if you don't remember what that is, that's like the crazy expensive Cadillac version of the Volt.
It is. And yet another car that Roman absolutely adores. He feels that it's one of the best looking Cadillacs built. And I agree that it's a decent looking car. Unfortunately, it's not much more sporty than the Volt. And at the same time, it's vastly more expensive.
Way more expensive.
They absolutely priced themselves out of the market. And people were looking at that and going, wow, I can get a Lexus hybrid for a lot less money that has actually better range and or capacity and or looks. So, on the bottom line, they just weren't able to sell them.
All right, next up is related to Cadillac. It's Chevrolet. We hit 3 GM brands right in a row.
Yep.
And for Chevy, the one-hit blunder that we decided to choose was the HHR, that weird retro van wagon thing.
Total ripoff of the Chrysler PT Cruiser.
Absolutely.
And the thing is about that, Chevy swears up and down, no, we weren't ripping it off. Yes, you were. I mean, you were making a retro front-wheel drive car that was based sort of on old design.
Yeah.
We get it. And unfortunately, you did a dreadful job at it.
Nathan, one time, right when this came out, I convinced my dad to rent one. I was like, Dad, we have to rent one of these. It looks so cool. And my dad, he was a nice guy. He is a nice guy, begrudgingly accepted my pleas. That was maybe the worst rental car I've ever been in. It was slow. It was poorly built.
Can't see out of it. The windows are small.
Anything. It was terrible. Next up is Chrysler, and a lot of you guys probably know what we're going to say for Chrysler. Of course, It's the PT Cruiser, and this might be one of those vehicles that was just plain bad.
Unfortunately, a couple things happened. One of which is dealerships jacked the prices like crazy. It was one of the first times that I can remember dealerships asking so much money over what the car was worth and hurting themselves by doing it. And down the line, they never updated the platform. Yes, there was a convertible version, which was a totally different car.
And a turbo version. But functionally speaking, it was the same thing for its whole 8-year lifespan.
It wasn't a very good car. It was a mediocre car at best. Yes, it had kind of a cool retro interior and a retro exterior. It turned terribly. It was one of the worst turning cars in the world. It has the worst turning circle of any car of that time period. I kid you not. It was horrible.
All right, next up is another FCA brand. It's Dodge.
Yeah, the Dodge Caliber. Or, as Tommy likes to say, the Calibra.
Oh, fancy.
Not a great car. It was built to replace the Dodge Neon, a small sedan, and it was supposed to be like a crossover, a hatchback.
Yeah, except it was front-wheel drive.
It was front-wheel drive. Now, they did have a hot version of it, and it was hot.
It had scoops and vents.
And
it had everything.
285 horsepower,
That's a pretty
four-cylinder
powerful,
turbocharged engine, and that was the SRT version, which didn't have a limited slip front diff, and because of that, it drove terribly. And it was an absolutely horrific machine to drive fast. All of the versions of that vehicle were not good. Yeah, not a great car.
You know what it didn't get? A second generation.
Let's
Let's keep moving on. Next up is Ford, and for Ford, the one-hit blunder is the Taurus X. And this, Nathan, might have just been like a branding mishap.
Yeah, I believe you're right on that. The Taurus X was...
Nothing like a Taurus.
It was nothing. It was an all-wheel drive wagon, slightly elevated off the ground. Think of it kind of as a Subaru Outback with a third-row seat that had a little bit more space and room. It was a larger vehicle. And honestly, I kind of liked the car when it first came out. I did go on the event. I did have a chance to play with one. And I thought, hey, this is kind of cool. But the name was just wrong. It didn't fit the car. It didn't fit any of the car at all. It should have been called something else.
All right, let's keep moving on. Another American manufacturer, GMC, and the one-hit blunder from GMC is the Envoy. Here's the issue with the Envoy, right?
Okay, go for it.
Essentially, it was a rebadged Trailblazer, which was rebadged not only into the Envoy, but also into the Isuzu Ascender, the Oldsmobile Bravada, the Buick Rainier, and the Saab 97X, not to mention this all was happening during the financial crisis in the late 2000s. I think this was just a case of GM way overdoing it on badge engineering, and they just had too many different versions. Let's keep moving on. Now Honda is next up, alphabetically speaking. For Honda, the one-hit blunder is actually kind of an interesting car, the CRZ. So this was that little kind of three-door hatchback that was a hybrid and also supposed to be kind of sporty. It looked cool, but it didn't go very cool.
Well, this is, it was built to sort of replace the hole in the heart of people who missed the CRX, which is something that I owned, and actually Roman had as well.
Yeah.
Sporty little car.
Cool car.
Yeah, it was a cool car. But it didn't handle very well. Between the battery weight and the way it was designed, it was never that much fun to drive.
Yeah, it was kind of slow.
It was slow.
Yeah, if it's not sporty and not efficient, it's not going to get a second generation. Let's keep moving on. Next up is Hyundai, and for Hyundai, the one-hit blunder is the Veracruz.
I remember this vehicle quite well. I did early days of Nathan reporting. I did a report on this vehicle, and I was really surprised by it because I thought the interior looked quite nice, and I couldn't figure out why it was there because they had a perfectly good Santa Fe. Turns out because they needed a third-row vehicle, and it did have a tiny third row. But it was overpriced. It was a little overwrought. Some people didn't like the styling, and the bottom line on that vehicle was it just wasn't popular, especially once Hyundai came out with the replacement for the Santa Fe, the new Santa Fe, which had a third row.
Yeah, you know, the Veracruz, I don't want to sound too mean, but it kind of looks like a budget version of the Lexus RX, doesn't it?
It was a bit of a ripoff on the Lexus
a little
RX.
bit. It didn't work out so hot.
Yeah.
Next up is Jaguar, and the one-hit blunder from Jaguar. We actually have another model, the Jaguar X-Type. Look at that. That is die-cast goodness right there.
One of Roman's favorite cars. He loved this thing.
No.
He had one. No, he really did.
Oh my goodness.
He had one and he loved it.
The problem with it, though, is that it wasn't really a Jaguar. This was back when Ford owned Jaguar, and essentially that was a Ford Mondeo. It was an all-wheel drive vehicle at first, and then it switched to a front-wheel drive option later on in production. It was only around for one production cycle, and people just didn't like it that much, except for Roman, maybe.
Roman loved it.
Okay, next up is Jeep, and the Jeep one-hit blunder. There were a few options we had here, but we decided to go with the Commander. It was based on the Grand Cherokee, but kind of worse than the Grand Cherokee, and I don't, like, if you had the Grand Cherokee, why wouldn't you just buy the Grand Cherokee?
Actually, they're very popular vehicles, and as used vehicles go, they're still pretty popular. My biggest issue with it was that because of the extra length and heft, it just made it not that much better off-road. In fact, it made it worse. And the third row was tiny. It wasn't very utilitarian because of that. You know, kids could barely go back there. And they were more expensive, obviously, than the Grand Cherokee. The other thing about them was that they really had a hard time with power. If you had the V6, you were screwed. Not enough power, so you had to get the V8.
Okay, let's keep moving on. Kia is next, and for Kia, we chose the Amante.
Do you remember that, guys?
Yikes. The Amante was not great.
Those were on the low end of Kia's design days. They've
this-
improved so much since
they've
then.
come so far from
The
the
Amante was actually involved in a couple lawsuits because the front end supposedly resembled the Mercedes-Benz at the time. It didn't. It just looked worse.
It was ugly.
It was so ungainly. The interior was pretty. I mean, you know, for what it was.
It was trying to be like upscale luxury, right?
Right. It was one of their first attempts in our market for an upscale luxury car. But the bottom line is nobody wanted them. I mean, nobody wanted them. It didn't sell well.
All right, guys, so that's it for part 1 of this video series. We are going to come back and do part 2, which will be letters L through Z in the alphabet.
Oh, yeah.
We just didn't want to keep this going for too terribly long. So for the Fast Lane Car, I'm Mike Curtis.
I'm Nathan Adlin.
And come back next episode to hear the rest of this list. See you guys next time.
See ya.